Hello, we're here in beautiful southern Ontario at the end of summer. It's the first week of September, and as you can see, the apples are ripening, and you can probably see my sunflowers back there in the background. Today we're going to look at some plein air, and we're going to do some studies of these apples, and maybe we'll do a drawing or two and do some painting on them. But I just wanted to show you how I set things up and how I get ready to do all that. So firstly, we do something where we pick a subject matter, something that interests us, something that is important to us, hopefully. And then we're going to do some thumbnails, and we're going to edit those thumbnails. So for me, I use the acronym FTE, which is focus, thumbnails, edit. And sometimes after you have edited, you need to go back and do another thumbnail to figure out what it is that you really want in this composition, what is really important to you. So as I'm looking at this, I see that there's some apples. I really like the blight on these apples, the fact that they're not perfect apples. I also like the architecture of the fence in the background. So I think that's probably where I'm going to start. So for me, I'm going to focus in on a group of apples, and then we're going to do some thumbnails, and then maybe we'll have to edit. So let's have a look at how I'm going to set this up. So you'll see here that I have my little stool that has a little carrying handle on it. Really easy to move around. Doesn't weigh very much, a couple of pounds. And it sets up really quickly and easily. I don't always sit when I do plein air. Sometimes I stand. It depends upon the circumstances, but I think I'm going to be here for more than a few minutes, so I'm going to use my stool. So I have decided that my focus for this particular painting is going to be these two apple trees with this fence, and perhaps the sunflowers in the background or some of the trees in the background. But primarily it's going to be the two apple trees with that fence across the back. Alright, so I have my piece of watercolor paper on my drawing board, and I have it clipped in place. This is the piece that I drew the lines out to make it 5 by 7. So I'm going to use this little margin over here to do my thumbnails on. And thumbnails are simply just that. It's a thumbnail about the size of your thumbnail, a quick little sketch to figure out what the composition is going to be. So for this, I have two apple trees and a fence in the background. I'm going to put the fence in. I'm going to have an apple tree on one side, apple tree on the other side. There's an apple on the ground down here, and maybe there's some sunflowers in the background. I could also redo this thumbnail, so I'm focusing in on my fence and my two apple trees, and I did a thumbnail, and now I'm going to edit that. So I'm thinking I'm going to make the one tree further to the left and the other tree further to the right, and then put the fence in the background. And there's an apple on the ground, and maybe there's a couple of my sunflowers in the background. And what happens if I just put in one apple tree and the fence in the background, put in the post, apple on the ground, some apples on the tree. I think I actually like this one a little bit better. It gives more focus to a singular tree instead of splitting the two up in the center, so I'm just going to go with that. So I draw with a pen. Some people prefer to use a pencil first and then go in and put the pen in, but for me, I just jump right in with the pen. So I figure out where my one post is going to be, and so in this one here I have the post slightly right of center, so that's where I'm going to put the post in for this particular drawing. I'm just going to put in a post, and this is a square post. That's all I'm going to do for it. For the tree itself, it has a white wrapping around the base of it because it's a young tree, and they do that to protect the bark so that no animals can gnaw on it or whatever, but I'm going to edit that out. So that's going to be one of my edits. I'm going to start off with this tree, just simply putting in a little bit of a trunk coming up there like this. There's a branch that comes out like this, and a main branch that leans off to the right, and then it has a couple of small branches coming off of it. There's also a small branch in the background here, so I didn't press very hard with the pen. You'll see that line might be a little bit lighter, and then we'll have another branch coming out like this with some more branches coming off of it, and then there's a few more small branches here like that. So that's probably all I'm going to do for that particular tree right now. Actually, I lied. I'm going to put in a couple of these smaller branches that are a little bit lower on the tree. And then I'm going to take my fence and I'm going to put in just a couple of boards. And you'll see I draw in long, steady lines. I'm going to turn my page to draw in the lines for the background here, but they're just going to go right over top of that tree for the most part, and then a little space for the part that's in the background. Now there is some sunflowers in the background, but I'll figure I'll paint those in as I move through the background painting here. So much of the background here is I'm going to make sky, but I am going to put in some yellow for some of those sunflowers in the background. So let's move on to that. So this is just simply my line drawing with my black pen. And I take my black pen and I put it into my little pouch on my chair. And I'm going to grab my paint set. This is my Sennelier paint set. And Sennelier paint are made with honey, so they are a little bit sticky. So sometimes when you open it up they get stuck on there like that. I'm going to take those just like that, my number 3 brush, and I'm actually going to turn it this way. And I'm going to take out my water bottle, and I'm going to take a little bit of water and pour it into one of these wells. That's it. I'm also going to get out a tissue, just a simple regular little tissue out of a travel size tissue bag, tissue pouch. And so the first thing I'm going to worry about here is the foreground across the bottom, and so I'm just going to take my brush, and you'll see I have this little bunch of mucky old paint. I'm just going to re-wet that, and I'm going to take some of that. I've got some lighter green here, and I'm going to get this pretty wet. I'm going to put this all across the bottom here. Get this really, I'm going to work really wet. So this, of course, is, for you that are familiar with watercolor, this is wet on dry. And I'm not trying to do too much here right now. I'm just sort of trying to get some color on the page. Alright. Of course, the tree itself is brown, so we can sort of re-wet some of this brown here, and I want mine a little bit more vibrant than that, so I'm going to go to the original brown, and that's sort of what it is that I'm looking for. It's a little bit darker, and I'm just going to put this right in my tree. Not too worried about it being exactly on those branches, because a lot of that's going to get painted over, just like that. So I'm going to leave a lot of the rest of this for now, and I'm going to re-wet my brush. Again, you can see I'm not too worried about cleaning it off really well. I'm just trying to get some color on the page right now. So I'm going to take this dirty water and I'm going to put it into the sky up here. One of the things about plein air is that it's going to dry up pretty quickly on you, so you want to get as much water on there as you possibly can fairly quickly. You'll see I'm kind of getting a lot of this wet and a little bit wetter still. And I'm just going to pick up a little bit of blue. This Sennelier blue is a beautiful, beautiful shade of blue. Keep that pretty wet. And then I'm just going to put this across that wet on the top there. And then, yeah, we're just going to let that get a little bit more water, thin it out a little bit more. Sort of reminiscent of the beautiful sky that we have today. A little bit more water. Don't be afraid about putting too much water on when you're doing plein air, because it will dry fairly quickly. So get as much water on there as you need to. And I got a little bit on the fence post there, but you can just take your tissue and do that, and you'll see it'll take that paint off there fairly quickly. So I'm going to keep moving here, and I'm going to wet this a little bit more with my slightly bluish now water. And I'm going to pick up some more of this green, and I'm just going to put a little bit of this green in through here. Everything is very, very green this summer. We had a lot of rain, so we've got a lot of, everything's really green. So I worked on this area up here fairly wet, and I worked on this area down here fairly wet. This area where I painted the brown on the tree, that's completely dry now. So I'm going to put in some color for this fence post, and it's a little bit of a grayish sort of brown, so I'm going to pick up some brown, and I'm going to make it fairly wet, and I'm just going to take a little wee tiny bit of black on, so I'm just going to touch this onto that black and make it a little bit darker, but I'm going to make it a little bit wetter also. And now I'm just going to simply put that on my fence post, and then a little bit across like that. A little bit across like that. There we go. And I made up enough brown that I could do all of that. And you'll see my brown is leaking up here into my blue. I don't really want that. So I'm just going to touch that a little bit with my tissue, and it's gone. But I am going to make this fence a little bit darker, I think. It's too much like the tree, so I want it to be a little bit of contrast. I'm going to pick up some more water, put it into my brown, pick up a little bit of black. It's a little bit too dark for me, but this is still fairly wet, so I'm just going to put in just a little bit into this, Not going to muck around with it too much. And then a little bit into this, across here, a little bit. And this is drying up really fast today because the sun is, it's about 75 degrees Fahrenheit out here, so the sun is drying this up fairly quickly on me. Again, I really don't want that to bleed out of there too much, so I'm just going to take that off. So what you can see is in this area here, it's very white still the white of the page. So I'm going to put a little bit of those sunflowers into that area. So again, I'm going to just use my dirty water here, and I'm going to put a little bit of yellow into some of that dirty water. And the sunflowers are fairly high up here, so I'm just going to put in some little hints of yellow. It doesn't have to be that they're in the exact spot. Obviously that's part of my editing process. These here are a little bit heavy for me, so I'm just going to dab it in, take a little bit of that out. Now I'm going to take a little bit of my dirty water here without any color on it. This is just dirty water. I'm going to lay that dirty water right in across there, and dirty water right in across there. And then just going to let that bleed, let it do its own thing. Now we're going to sort of paint in some of these bits of this tree. I'm going to let this dry up a little bit first. Alright, so about 5 minutes has passed and this is mostly dry. I would say it's about 95% dry, but it's more than dry enough for us to start on what it is we're going to do here in this tree. So again, I'm going to get my dirty water and mix up some green, and I'm going to use the very, very tip of my number 3 brush, and we're just going to put in a little bit of leaves. These leaves are obviously starting to get a little bit brown, so we're just going to put in a little bit of green for these leaves. Alright, so I mixed up a little bit of brown, and I put a little bit of brown in here for these trees, and for these leaves I should say. So we have, I think I have all the leaves, everything I want to do to the leaves in that. So what I'm going to do now is get out, I'm going to reach into the little pocket of my stool here and pull out my Sharpie pen again. And there's several very prominent apples on this tree, and I'm going to put in, not all of them, but I think I'm going to put in, quite a few of them. But I'm just going to put them in with a little bit of a semi kind of a circle, just like that. I'm not going to worry too much about the exact spot that the apple's in. I want to sort of allude to the apple rather than, draw in every little bit and piece of the apple. So what I'm going to do now is put my Sharpie pen away. And you'll see I just have a couple of spots of red in there. But I would say my water is a little bit too dirty to paint a red apple right now. So I'm going to get myself a little bit more water in one of these wells. Do the lid back up on my water bottle, set it back down, and I just have a little bit. You'll see each one of these just has, this is the dirty water that was very, very dirty, so I don't really want to paint red with that. So I got myself some fresh water. I'm going to just rinse that off a little bit, And I'm going to find a semi-clean spot or a place that I have had red on here before. Here's one down here. Get a little bit of red going on there. Touch my red, make it a little bit redder and a little bit wetter. These apples, no apple is perfect. No apple has a perfect red on it. I'm just going to touch a little bit of this. You'll see I'm not painting the entire spot red. Just a little bit of the spot red. And then I'm going to take my water and I'm going to mix up a little bit of yellow now. So you'll see my water is slightly a pink tinge. I'm going to pick up a little bit of yellow. And I'm going to put that little bit of yellow in that red spot because these apples have a lot of yellow in them. And I think that's gone just a little bit too orangey for me, so I'm going to pick that up. Now, one of the great things about watercolor is that we can very easily fix things like that. I didn't like that, it was too orangey for me, so now I'm going to start with just a little bit of a yellow wash and put that red into it. And again, that's a little bit too watery for me, so I'm just going to let that dry for a second. Pick this up. A little bit too much on that brush. And that's more like what it is that I'm going for. More of like the color that I'm going for right there. A little bit of yellow. Like that on those apples. Gives you a slightly different effect. The other thing that we have going on here now is we have a really good contrast going between these red apples and this green. Also, the brown is a little bit red, so the green really contrasts against it really well. I'm not going to do too much more with those sunflowers in the background. I'm probably going to leave them well enough alone. This branch here in reality doesn't have any apples on it, so I'm not going to put any apples on it, and this branch here really doesn't have any either, and neither do any of these lower ones. There is apple on the ground here, so we could grab our little Sharpie pen and make a small circle for an apple down here, but I think that's a little too contrived. That's a little too cliche maybe. So instead of doing that, I'm going to put my Sharpie away, and I'm just going to grab some red, and I'm just going to hint that maybe an apple fell off the tree. Maybe a couple of apples fell off the tree, and leave it at that. So I think that's really it for this painting. I'm going to put a mat on it and let you see what it looks like with a mat, but I think that's probably the end. So I'm going to take my number 3 brush, put it into that fairly clean water there, wipe it off with my tissue a little bit. It can go in here. You can simply take your tissue and pick up the water that's in these wells here. You can simply just dry that up fairly easily with a tissue. One tissue will do it, and there you go. So I leave all of this paint. This paint is all usable. You see me use it at the beginning. It's very easy to re-wet that and turn it back into color, so there's no reason to clean this up. My palettes are typically pretty dirty because I realize that I can reuse that paint, and I'm a little cheap. So I'll show you what this looks like with a mat on it once it dries, and then that's it. So this is the finished piece, and you can see the little thumbnails around the outside there. And this is a little 5x7 mat that I carry around, and so you'll see that it gives it a little bit of a finished look. It closes off all those little thumbnails so you can't see them. If you like this video, please click like. Better yet, click follow and follow along so you don't miss any of the upcoming videos. If you're looking for any of the products that I talked about, links to those will be in the description below. I hope you picked up a few tips or tricks from this video. Thanks for checking me out.